Have you had that experience when you're leading a meeting or you're on a panel of experts or maybe even doing an interview with a reporter and the conversation goes in a direction that is not productive and you're not able to achieve the goals of what you set out to do because things are going off track? My name is Christine Clapp, and I am here with two of my communication experts, Lynne and Lisa, and we're here to give you some strategies to help prevent those situations where the conversation goes off track, and also to give you some strategies of how to respond when you're facilitating or moderating, what you can do in the moment to get things back on track. So let's start off, Lisa, what should we be doing before a meeting, a panel, or a media interview or some other event to make sure that we are making the best use of time and have a reduction in the opportunities for things to go off track?
You set up really exactly what is the first thing to come to mind for me. And it really is so true of all of the things that we do as public speakers. Most of the important work we're going to do will have started long before we get into the room. So if we know how much time we have, if we know what areas we want to focus on, if we can even anticipate ahead of time, what are the things that people are likely to want to slip in here? I know who's in the room. I know what might come up and say, I got to be prepared to keep us on track with this and to know where some of the distractions might come in. How I set things up can make a huge difference. So how do I make clear parameters for this is how much time we have? This is the focus of our conversation. These are some of the things that we might want to talk about in this conversation. So anything that I can say ahead of time that lets people know this is our focus. These are some things we might talk about on another day in other circumstances, so that you leave, I don't want to say that you make it hard for people to contribute what they want to contribute, but you do set a path that's clear and make it easier for people to stay on it. And then I think that makes it easier to do the next piece, which is once you've set those really clear parameters and everybody knows what we're here for, then when something comes in that takes people off track a little bit, you've set yourself up well to say, thank you so much for contributing that. So we thank you for whatever you contribute. It doesn't matter if it's off track. Thank you for contributing that. That's an interesting point. Since we've agreed today to focus on X, let's save that. Or can we circle back to that? Or can we bring that into our next meeting? So use the parameters that you've set up. And I think the beauty of that is that the person who wanted to talk about something else might feel a little bit thwarted, but also you've indicated to everybody in the room, we're going to respect your time. We're going to respect our purpose. And I think most of the people in the room are thanking us for that when we do it. So we can genuinely be glad that people have other things to say. And I always think of it as just the and, not the but. Yes, but we're not going to talk about that today. Feels really different from, that's a really great point. And I hope we'll have a chance to talk about it in our next meeting.
Amazing. Those are great tips, Lisa. I like to say that the best offense is a good defense. So in football, you oftentimes hear the best defense is a good offense, but for facilitating meetings, thinking about it ahead of time, being strategic about having a timed agenda, a clear goal for the meeting, and to also think about the individuals who might be constantly or regularly taking things off track, to try to anticipate ahead of time and give them a speaking role. So hopefully that might give them an opportunity to take ownership of something and scratch that itch, that need to talk and contribute. So sometimes that's a way where you can sometimes co-opt people that oftentimes regularly take us off track, and think about ways to involve other people whose voices may not be heard as much because there's certain people who like to fill that time. So thinking about ways of being equitable, giving people work to do to help have them contribute positively. I think these are all great strategies, and you have to be willing to interrupt as a facilitator of a meeting or the moderator of a panel. When you give a timed agenda, you're making a promise to the listeners or the participants of that session of what you're going to do, and you have to follow through. Otherwise, your next agenda will be meaningless. You have to practice interrupting, to have a friend tell a story with way too much detail and go on and on and on, and get in the habit of saying, wow, your vacation sounded really amazing, and I would love to tell you about my vacation. Or practice, get into the habit, or work on the specifics of the meeting. Because if you're not going to jump in and interrupt, again, that timed agenda is not going to have much meaning. And when you do interrupt with a time agenda and clear goals, what happens is you are not the villain. We oftentimes think that interrupting is a terrible thing. It's a villainous thing to do. But when you have set up the parameters, you do have the timed agenda, you become the hero when you keep us on track and you don't let an individual take us off track. So I think that it's a really important thing to reframe, have the plan in place, and to follow through with it during the meeting makes you the hero, not the villain. Lynne, I would love to hear your perspectives of how to get people back on track when things go off the rails a bit. I would love to hear about your thoughts on panels and meetings, but also you're an expert in media. So how does this apply to media interviews as well?
Well, first, I just want to underscore what you both just said about planning ahead in a meeting, uh, coming up with an effective way of interrupting. Sometimes an effective way of interrupting is to seize on one of the points that they're making. That last phrase, that is a really good, that's really good point that you're making, and it really feeds back into what we were talking about overall. And you sort of take them along with you, and you're thanking them for helping you in the presentation. I also think that in the planning of any sort of presentation, feeding off of what Lisa just said, is that you may want to build in 5 minutes or just a little bit of time at the end of your presentation where you might normally do Q&A or whatever, so that you might be able to honestly say, that's a good point. I'd like to get back to that. We'll try to circle back to that at the end of this presentation. And you mean it. You're not just blowing somebody off. Another thing I would say is that don't be so wedded to your script and to your presentation that if somebody brings up something that's important and you see everybody all of a sudden do like a murky and like, what? And you realize and you're reading the room like, I think we need to pay more attention to this. You may have to give up some of your agenda, because if you see that somebody's brought up something that is important, you can't be so wedded, or you should not be so wedded to your script that you're not following and giving more information, giving a chance for more interaction with your group. In media interviews, especially with people who are professional speakers or politicians or something like that, they can filibuster, or they will try to filibuster. And I would say that the same sort of strategy can be clear there, where you can interrupt and say, hold on just a minute there. I hear what you're saying and I appreciate the additional context, but can we go back to what you had said before? Now, if you're on the other end of it and you're being interviewed and all of a sudden the interviewer is taking you someplace that for which you had not prepared, well, first of all, you can say that. I don't really have all the information about that particular topic. I'd like to get back to you on that. I don't want to lead you astray. So if that's okay with you, let's I can focus more on topic A and then answer that question. Don't try to make it up. Don't try to dance and finesse on a question for which you have not been prepared. And if they press you on it, be pleasant and respectful, but just make sure that you're saying to them, I don't think it's going to serve you well for me to try to answer a question that I'm not vetted on.
Excellent advice. Thank you so much, Lynne. I really absolutely agree with you about being flexible. So I think one of the things that great leaders and speakers do is that they prepare and practice thoroughly so that in the moment they can be responsive and they can see, oh, this really is an important issue that I do need to bring to the forefront. This is not something that we can put in the parking lot for the last 5 minutes of the meeting or the next meeting. People are concerned about this. And I think that it does happen. It's not every single day, but there are those times when, as a leader, you have to be able to say, aha, this is one of those times. And for me to be a good leader, I have to be a listener today rather than really driving this agenda. So I think that's really important, Lynne, is to know when to go back on track and to be ready to go off track if it seems like it is important to do in that moment on that occasion.
I call that dynamic flexibility.
Ah, I love that. I love that. Amazing. So, as someone who is in a situation, whether you're moderating a panel, facilitating a meeting, you're engaging in an interview with a reporter, dynamic flexibility. I want you to think ahead of time, do the preparation, do the practice that you can to feel confident. And if you need to take a turn, take the turn, feel the room, be aware of what's going on. And that can only happen when you prepare, you plan, you rehearse. Otherwise, you can't be present. I think one of the things that people think is the root of presentation is to present, but I really think it's presence or being present. And if we aren't in that zone where we can be present, it is really hard to be effective at achieving our goals in any speaking situation. So thank you so much, Lynne. Thank you so much, Lisa, for your advice. And I hope our community can benefit from the suggestions that you gave today.